Recently, I was talking to a fellow African who lives in diaspora from Mozambique. No, sorry, from Angola. And he indicated to me that there's a second scramble for Africa, which got me thinking, if there's a second scramble for Africa, are the Africans even going to get a chance? He alluded to the fact that most of the people scrambling are Europeans, Americans, Canadians. And I'm afraid that some Africans who live in diaspora, like my two guests, our two guests in the virtual studio this evening, Dr. Esai Omeni and Mr. Ruben Gerardo, both of them are distinguished Africans living in diaspora. And I'm wondering, do these gentlemen know that there's a second scramble for Africa? Gentlemen, do you know there's a second scramble for Africa? And Africans may even lose out on this?
Yes, I can see what your friend is Angolan, right?
Yes,
Is
Angola.
talking about. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Do you agree that there's a second scramble for Africa? And this time around, some Africans may lose out on it. What do you think about that, Dr. Ameni?
Yeah, hi. First of all, thanks for having me here. I can understand the sentiment behind the characterization of a scramble for Africa, but the idea that I think there is a difference in the scramble for Africa this time, mostly because I think Africans are a little more aware and conscious that they're scrambling, and so hopefully that puts them in a position
Yes.
where they can redirect what that scramble looks like. Now, there's not a lot of time or circumstance, but I believe that Africans are in a better position to redirect what this is. And hopefully it will change from a scramble for Africa to more of an interaction with Africa.
Africa.
You know?
Okay. Thank you. And I know I threw you gentlemen straight into the anvil, into the fire. We didn't even have time to let you catch your breath. I want us to pause for a second and get a chance to know a little bit about you because, hey, you bring different perspectives to this issue. One of you is a technology person. One of you is more of a social activist, a social observer. I'd like to start with Dr. Ameni. Please, can you introduce yourself a little bit in the context of who you are and what you do?
Okay. Yeah, my name is Isaidan Omene. Most people call me Isai. That's what my mom calls me also, so that's okay. I live in the U.S., specifically Grand Rapids in Michigan, and I work in engineering leadership at an auto manufacturer. I specialize in electromagnetics and electronics, and I'm a manager with them. That is what keeps my bills. That's what pays my bills. But as we will discover, I am a passionate person for improving the outcomes of Africa and Cameroonians in particular. And I am a fervent Pan-Africanist, depending on how you actually define what Pan-Africanism is.
Oh, thank you, Doc. So you are the people that are making all these new fancy cars, some that can fly, some that can swim, some can dive, some can perform. Are you one of those guys behind
Yes,
all of
we
those
are.
techniques?
We are in the in between somewhere there. Yes, we are able to get of some of that cake, pretty much.
We
Yes.
we are honored and privileged to have you around this virtual fireside. I
Yeah.
call it the Story Warrior fireside. I mean, I wish we were back home with roasting
I
corn,
know, right? We
roasting
just have some
maize,
corn
and
Yes.
eating and talking.
Oh, no.
But because
and some
of
plums.
yes,
African
and
plums.
plums. I don't know if Ruben knows plums, but we come to that. But this new reality is we're spread out around the world, different cities. We can still congregate, we can still meet around this virtual fireside and talk about issues that are important to us. Let's get to know who is joining us. Mr. Gerardo, please tell us
Mhm.
where you're joining from. I know I can guess it's some part of Texas. I don't know where precisely. Tell us a
Yeah,
little bit about your background, sir.
yeah. My full name is Roe Ruben Gerardo. I am residing presently in West Texas, in Decatur, actually. And I'm just gonna be brief on my story. Like you said, my background is really social kind of activism in a way, trying to bridge the gaps of really identity And that just kind of bred out of my own experience. Came to the U.S. when I was very young. I was actually 4 years old when we first came to the United States. We were in Chicago, Illinois. My dad's a pastor, so he went to school there. Actually in Deerfield, we came to Dallas. I was here till I was 12. Went home till I was 16. So 12 to 16, I was back in Chad. Came back to the U.S. From 16 to the age of about 21, and then went back to Chad, and I was, in Chad for 10 years. So it's just been a lot of back and forth, and so that really, played with my identity. Being American and African, and like I say, I'm an African American now because I have both passports. But I've, through a lot of things. Well, I won't go into it, but I think they'll come up as we talk. Has really began to shape my thing around the importance of culture and identity. Because I believe it's the anchor as we advance, as Dr. Isai has said, advance with technology. We Africans have something to give that anchors us with our identity. And that has been a struggle. I think we've both felt it. All three of us have. And speaking a lot of Africans, that just because we're here and we have all of these things, there's still something missing. When we talk about that.
Wow. Thank you so much. Permit me to call you Brother Ruben, because first you're from Chad. You're like our neighbors. I'm originally from Cameroon.
We're neighbors.
So is Dr.
Look,
Ameni.
guys, nobody even said this. Look what I'm wearing, man.
I know,
noticed that.
we're getting
Y'all
there.
notice it?
We're getting
I
there.
couldn't come out here with my Cameroonian brothers.
I took notice of that, brother. And
Togo.
please forgive me for just.
Sidoni's husband, Tarfu, gave me this. As our executive director of the African think tank. She's from Cameroon. Her husband gave me this. I love it, man. I was like, Cameroon. And I lived in Kusuri for a year. So that's right on the border with Chad, with Jamena. So so Mara, Gara, Yaoundé, all of those places I've been.
That is as graphy boy as it gets.
Yeah, for sure.
Good for you. You're claiming your heritage, brother. So we're talking about identity, we're talking about culture, we're talking about technology. There's an intersection there, but more importantly, I see that there's also a gap between those of us in diaspora and back home. That gap, if we manage it well, it can bring us together. If we don't manage it well, it can further tear us apart. So I want to ask Brother Ruben, what do you think is the best way to use technology to bring us closer?
Like we're doing now. I mean, I'm really as you know me, I like to meet people face to face.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it's not possible all the time. And so I'm also getting more into technology so that I can have more of these conversations. There's individuals I want to talk to in Zambia. And so unfortunately, I don't have the money to fly there as much as I'd like to. But we can't. Technology is part of the global existence now. And as Africans, we realize that we have to be a part of it. We just have to utilize it in a way that makes sense for us, that benefits us, but also takes into account our cultural aspects. And so one of the things we talk about the Africans in diaspora and the Africans back home.
Yes.
But also, in Africa itself, as it continues to grow and our more and more wealthy Africans, there's also a gap I'm beginning to see between the Africans that have and the Africans that do not have. And Isai and I talked about that because we still have to remember, as we look, when people talk about Africa and how it's be a billion, young people who are going to be employed, who's going to be a job market and all that stuff. Well, they talk about the big cities. Like if you look at Accra, Ghana, or maybe Yaoundé, or,
Lagos. Lagos,
Yeah,
Nigeria.
Lagos, Nigeria, exactly. Those big cities, you're talking about that. But don't forget, Africa's still rural. The majority of Africa is still rural. And so of all these young people in the rural communities that we somehow need to remember and not just add to our numbers to puff them up, but don't have any really tangible actions or involvement with them outside of, nonprofit organizations and such things like that. So I might have deviated, but technology is part of our life and we have to use it.
Okay. So, that is definitely undeniable. But I don't know, Dr. Ameni, you work with technology to some extent, and we were supposed to have Mr. Sam Rugi from Kenya, who is full-blown technology guy. He's into cybersecurity. Unfortunately, something came up,
Yeah, had he been
and
here,
he
I'd have
didn't.
been like Kenya in the house.
There
But
you go.
I was like,
There
make
you
sure we
go.
represent every country as possible.
There you go. He's not here, but
So
if there's
he'll see it.
anyone that's closer to technology enough, it is you, brother Isai.
Yeah.
Tell us, is this technology bringing us closer, or is it driving a wedge between the haves and the have-nots, or those in diaspora and those back home?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm going to try to answer it as briefly and succinctly as possible.
Okay.
I see more technology as a tool. And like every other tool, it depends on who is using it and how they are using it. And I think it behooves Africans to look at it that way and use it for our advantage.
Okay.
I'm a student of history, and so I like to see how others have done it. 20, 30 years ago, we were around the same level of GDP with people like Singapore or the Philippines. And we cannot catch their coattails where we are now.
Not at all.
India has been reinvigorated over the last 2-3 decades.
Yes.
And how did they do it? They use software.
Yep.
Right? They became a stalwart in the world for software, and one of the reasons was because with software you need just human capital mostly. You don't have the capital of the West. And there is this new technology that is out. We use what we have. We have intellectual capital. And they invested in that, and now they are pretty much the de facto place for software production. Now we're in an era now where technology is past just software. There's hardware, there is AI, there are so many different branches that we are using some. But my question is, are we using it to only bring us together, or are we using it as a force for economic empowerment? I am a strong believer, especially from an African perspective, that we have to liberate ourselves economically before we can almost liberate ourselves politically. Because economic liberation gives power and agency to the individual. You're not waiting for the government to do for you. And technology is one of the most powerful and cost-effective ways, because you can just use this more often than not, and you don't need massive amounts of capital, which we do not have. To do it. And so to that end, I say technology is a force for good for us, but it is also a force that we need to be watchful about, because what has happened over the last full decade or so is, with the proliferation of social media, our culture, our values are even more challenged, because there is a massive amount of information inflow. We have always been influenced by the West, but that influence has skyrocketed exponentially because of media, because of technology. It is accessible, it is affordable, and so we need to be watchful as to how we and the generations that follow use this, or use the information that they can get from media, because it can quickly erode some of the values that we hold dear, and those values that hold us to say we are African. There are some values that we hold on to that, but there is so much more out there flooding them that I think we owe them a debt to be able to curate, or let me not say curate, or at least to teach what those values are, so that they can stand the winds of time that are blowing towards them at massive speeds.
Wow, that is very deep, and there's something there that you shared that I felt like I was gonna grab my vuvuzela. I usually have the vuvuzela moment. Whenever something so profound comes up, I'm bound to kind of like because I cannot resist. We need economic economic empowerment first, even more than we need political empowerment. And that's it's a proven fact, because look at Southeast Asia. I spent a lot of time in Singapore. They're not the most, I'm not going to comment, Malaysia, Indonesia, Hong Kong. But economically, you can say you got a force to be reckoned with. And that's Even China, whether we like them or not,
Correct.
they have proven to be a major force. No other country in the history of mankind has lifted up 600 million people from poverty into middle class in less than 15 years.
In that
They're the
speed.
only
Correct.
country. And at that speed, that's incredible. So you have a point there. So when we look at the emerging technologies, I see that, yes, they're bringing some of our people together, but also driving, creating a gap in some cases. For example, a guy sits in the Scandinavia, connects with a young woman in Cameroon, in Yaoundé, in Douala, who knows, in Jamena, falls in love with them. Before you know, the sister is gone. Is that technology bringing us closer, or is that creating a wider gap? I don't want to comment about it. On the other hand, we also had some guys that very often some of them came out of Nigeria. They perpetrate what they call the 419 crimes.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Mm.
people in the West have become victims of that. And when I used to live in Singapore, I go somewhere, they ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm from Cameroon. They say, are you sure? I say, yes. They say, but you don't, you don't look Cameroonian. You look Nigerian. Go and tell your brothers to stop sending me those crazy emails. I'm like, can you even tell the difference between a Nigerian and a Cameroonian? You
No.
can't tell the difference. I can't tell. But my point I'm trying to make here is technology, as you both of you allude to, is bringing, it can bring us closer, it can also bring us apart. So the question then is, as we go forward, what are the new technologies that we must embrace, and what are some of those that we should be careful about?
Well, I'll leave all that new technology because I'm getting into it more to Dr. Zai, but he made something apparent that I'm getting to know more is artificial intelligence. So you had Ben Collins on, I think, a few episodes ago, and so I had the
Yes.
opportunity to go and to see some of the technology using artificial intelligence, and we really got to talking of how that can be used
Mhm.
to actually close the gap
Okay.
for in Africa.
Yes.
If young people here or young in the US or around the world, young people in Africa, they're able to travel the world without
Mhm.
physically going, right?
Yes.
At this
Yes.
point. And that's what most of the case will be. To go somewhere is, I think, is better, but
Mhm.
with AI, it gives us opportunity to engage and encounter and interact with people from around the world, which will allow us to grow our or to fight back our ignorance, right?
Yes.
And so ignorance also segue into there's a quote that says, Africa is considered the black continent or the dark continent, but the only thing dark about
Mhm.
it is our ignorance of it, right? And so people are ignorant of the continent. They don't know. And I will even say,
I would even, sometimes I argue that the only thing dark about it is chocolate, nothing more. So, okay, that's an aside.
in the
Okay,
so
I'm
I mean,
sorry
I
I
would
had to
say that
interrupt.
even as Africans, we need to. We've talked about this, Dr. Zai, is like we're ignorant of our own continent, our own places.
That
Like
is correct.
I learned a lot about Cameroon from Isai and his wife when I was here, but when I lived next door, there's things
Yes.
I didn't know because I was so just enthralled into life at times. And
Yes.
we
Yes.
are. So I'm not arguing that
No.
that we don't know what's happening in our neighboring countries. And so we have to, as you know, we can call out other people. But I think
Mhm.
I call out Africans as well as like, hey, we have a lot to give. We need to learn about our neighbors. And I mean Africans will tell me, oh, you're the first Chadian I've ever met. Not really,
Mm.
and that's true. I mean, in a way, the first
Yeah.
Chadian.
Yeah.
But also you said something I want to touch on really quick is soft skills.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's when you were talking the soft skills with our music and our food, that has the power to export
Yes.
out of Africa. And a lot more, I think with a
Yes.
lot more music and a lot more food is infiltrating life here in America. That's where we really have our power. Now
Yes.
speaking, and I end here with the political piece of it, you're 100% right. It's our soft skills that really have the power. Unfortunately, our politics hasn't very good. I'm a political science major. That's what I studied. And the only caveat I add to that is it even though it has hindered us, it is still a part of our lives.
That is
And
correct.
Mhm.
if we do not have individuals who are willing to fight on our behalf in those spaces, we will get crushed. So
Yes.
even if you can't make change, sometimes you have to hold back the
Mhm.
the the some stupidity or ignorance of leaders who are stifling technology or opportunity to connect economically. You have
Yes.
to have allies in that space. allies in that space. And that's just the reality of it. We can't set aside the political and act like it's not going to have an influence, because it has had for many, many years. Early on with colonization and independence, it was those political movements that freed, the early leaders freed us through political movements. And now it's us through technology and this new era to move it on. But we have to work hand in hand, have allies in that space. So I just want to caveat, now the new technologies that, Doctor, you would have to speak to that.
Yes.
I think for me, I always say, I always say, if I run for political office ever, my slogan is going to be protect us, connect us, get out of the way.
Yeah.
Wow. That's deep.
Yeah. You got my
protect
vote.
us, connect us, get out of the way. You got my vote. You got my vote too.
That for me is the function of government is protect us, connect us, and get out of the way. And the very basis of that is that my belief about Africa is the belief in the people. If you can connect us with technology, the internet, transportation, if you can protect us so that we don't have to be looking over our backs for neo-colonialist tendencies, get out of the way and watch the African spirit.
Absolutely.
And we will. Sometimes it's amazing that all the stories we hear about Africa are the negative ones. That has been one of our problems. We don't tell our positive stories.
Yes.
But there are positive stories. And I always say, if there can be positive stories within this kind of a context, with the corruption, with the dire lack of forward-looking progressive leadership, only imagine what can happen if the door cracks up a little bit. So I couldn't agree with Ruben more that in as much as we are trying to make progress within our economic spaces and empowerment, we definitely need to challenge and keep challenging the powers that be, so that those cracks where people can be connected and provided for open even larger, right? And to do that, there are a couple of ways we can do it. We can use technology, but we need to also start using the soft part of this, which is we need to start telling ourselves positive stories.
Yes, sir.
There's a despondency and a psyche that comes with negativity. Psychologists have studied this forever. If that is all you are exposed to,
then you start to believe it.
Mentality gets to understand.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take rocket science to get into any African discussion a lot of the times in the diaspora. And it is how much everybody else has done wrong. That we are not doing anything because they have done everything wrong. And so that is true.
Yeah.
Everybody else says that. The West wants us to hear that all the time because they know the power it has.
Yes.
In our mental. Bob Marley talks about mental slavery. I think we have a lot of that.
Yes.
And that is not putting your head in the sand.
Yep.
When you say, I am going to start saying the positive ones, it is not putting your head in the sand. There is no sand. Everybody else tells you about that negative story.
Yes.
But once we start seeing the shoots come out, when we start identifying perspective is everything. Once you start saying there is this, that is one blade of grass versus this is all barren earth, your perspective shifts, even if it's just a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And that can do a lot for us.
Wow. That is.
Can I segue into that real quick? Man, you got me excited. This is why we talk, man, bro. We don't need a prompting. But you said something that I just want to put in this quote, because this is one of my favorite quotes that motivates a lot of work that I do. Because you talked about Bob Marley. I want to talk about Bantu Stephen Biko of South Africa. People know Mandela, but Bantu, and there was Robert Sobukwe. There was other leaders that are not well known as Mandela who really moved the movement forward. And his thing of perspective. This is what he said. The first step, therefore, is to make the Black man come to himself. To pump back life into his empty shell, to infuse him with pride and dignity, to remind him of his complicity in the crime of allowing himself to be misused and therefore letting evil reign supreme in the country of his birth.
Yeah.
For me, that question of complicity is powerful.
Correct.
Because to what Isai was just talking about is we can talk about colonialism and all the wrongs. I mean, there are pages in history you can do all of that. Yep. But what is your complicity in all of this?
Correct.
As Africans?
Thank you.
To have allowed these things to happen from generation to generation.
Ouch.
And continue to do it, and the power balances that may be. And as I alluded to this earlier, that in this maybe new quote unquote scramble for Africa, the power balance is different now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
With technology and the African diaspora growing and obtaining positions of leadership, whether in government or in agencies, organizations, the power balance has shifted. Right?
Yes.
And there still may be there. It's more equalized. We have more of that in our hands to no longer to say no longer be complicit in these things, but have the
Mm.
power to actually engage and counter them if we see any negatives and wrongs done.
Yep.
And the storytelling must come from us. That's why I love Story-Warrior.
Yeah.
You
Thank
have
you.
to tell the story. When I
Correct.
was in Zambia and working with those young Zambian youth, man, it was powerful. I said, you need to tell your story, not the organization. They
Correct.
will tell the story in the way that benefits them and how it makes them look good, and to whoever the Western benefactors are, or things of that nature. But you, as the Zambian youth who are in this, need to tell it from your perspective, tell it honestly, and even in the negatives. This is what I want to add also is that our negative stories, our negative things in Africa, corruption and
Yeah.
war. But you have to look beyond that and understand the underlying reasons for it,
Reasons for the war.
Yep.
right? It's just not a famine because it existed in thin air. What's happening in South Sudan and what's happening in Cameroon and Nigeria
Yep.
and all the northern Uganda, all of these things, if you just stop at negative, oh, this is happening. But why is it? And
Yes.
even in that, and this is why I like finding this positive stories even in times of hardship. I was a refugee in 2008 in Cameroon because we had a coup that year.
Yep.
And I was in Nigeria and the coup started. I came back and I remember something. I couldn't get into Jamena. So I'm looking over the riverbank and I hear the gunfire. And so I sit down with my fellow Chadians who had come there. And the days we spent there together, laughing and talking and engaging. It was a bad situation, but we still found ways to do life in those hard circumstances.
Yes.
So yes, those things are happening, and but there's still joy to be found, not in what's happening, but people still live their lives.
There you go. You see, this is quite a bit to unpack. But I was so lucky today. I was talking to a diasporan who is in Central African Republic. And she said to me, this place has been taken over by Americans, Russians, and everybody else.
Yeah.
She said they discovered mercury somewhere. The natives ran away crying foul, that was blood. And the Americans and the rest were happy to come in and collect their spoils. And she said to me, there's so much going on here. You've got to come and take a look at this. They're selling up the place. They're buying the place. Now, I've not been to Central African Republic, Car. You know, our Central African region is the least connected in all of Africa. I'm sure we know that. East Africa is more connected. Southern Africa, I spent a lot of time in Southern Africa. I went to literally almost every country there. But Central Africa, for whatever reason, is the least connected. North Africa, of course, they're well connected. So there's some issues still going on. The scramble is going on, and we're probably not even aware of. We're here struggling with our own identity. We're here crying foul, and yet we're partly complicit. Do you know the largest metropolis in the world is going to be around Accra, Ghana to Lagos? It's projected to have over 500 million people in the next, by 2050. The largest metropolis on earth is going to be in Africa. It's going to start from Lagos all the way to Accra. It's going to be a conurbation there based on a study. But the reason I'm bringing that up is to say, as Africans in diaspora, are you starting businesses? Are you doing something that you can take some of this technology from here? You can take some of the awareness from here back home to change the lives of our people? Or are you complicit, as I am in some ways complicit? Talk to me about that. Let's start with Dr. Ameni.
And this is amazing. That almost every question you ask is like I'm going to jump out because it's so loaded. But I'm going to talk about it this way. In the most basic definition of that word, I would say to a certain level. At the same time, we need to we need to approach it with a certain level of compassion, because people have gone through a lot
Yes.
to be able to find something
Yes.
better for themselves and for their kin.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that in itself has been a struggle of survival, which in
Mhm,
itself is
mhm.
victory,
Yeah.
if you understand. And so to some people, that is where the debt ends, right? I can now do for myself and for mine, and
Yes.
that is all I owe my existence to. And to that, I doff my hat. At the same time, I think for a lot of people, myself and all of us here included, we think the debt goes a little further.
Yes.
Is that if we have come and seen and gained perspective, we cannot only do that for us,
Thank you.
because there is more people back home
Yes.
than they are out here who have
Yes.
not seen and done and been able to do for theirs. And
Yes.
so if you have, then I think we owe a debt to our people, to us, to
Yes.
give something back. And I'm not talking only money, because we already give a lot of money. Cameroon, for example, 27-28% of our GDP is remissions, right?
Wow.
It's just the
Yeah.
amount of money we send back to
Hmm.
pay bills and to send kids to school and to do projects that don't work. All
Yes.
of that
Mm.
was, so that is the amount that the diaspora is already doing by almost not doing anything,
Yeah.
right? In a
Yeah.
sense. And so they are already, all just by taking care of yours, you are already giving back. But I think there is
Yeah.
more that we can do, because it is not only about the economic part of this, it's also about the mental and intellectual. We have seen different. We
Yes.
should teach different, because we know
Yes.
that
Mhm.
with different we can make something better for ourselves, right? And so my outlook for this is, if you are here, if you're anywhere in the diaspora, you are already doing, I know, a lot, because you are taking care of more than one mouth, more
Thank
often
you.
than not. But I know I challenge you that there is just another level you can go. There is
Mm.
something else you can do. And I would admonish that do not do it alone.
Oh.
Do it with others, people who
Yes.
are a bridge builders, people who
Yes.
are finding the ways of doing business well,
Yes.
people who are finding the opportunities and the connections to do it well. Because if I have heard this story so many times, oh, I did this, I went back to do something, and it got crushed by the government, or
Yep.
it got eaten up by a relative, or I'm sure we have all heard those stories. And so there are better ways to do it. And
Mm.
I would challenge people who are trying to go that extra mile to band together, to find people who are doing it well, find those right
Yes.
stories, they already exist,
Yes.
and band together, because I think we can do better
Far better.
together than
Yes.
we have been doing so far.
Okay. We'll definitely be coming back to you because I believe you are involved in some things in that
Mhm.
level that
Yeah,
are helping people to find new bridges or new conveyor belts that allow ideas, resources to flow and have impact on the ground. But let
correct.
me go back to Brother Ruben. Are you complicit in some ways? Am I complicit? Please, you're a social critic. Be generous. Be I mean, be critical, but also be generous because you know what? We we've come a long way.
Yeah, we have.
No, I would say yes, and I think my brother Isai has said things clearly as well. Is that you know I've been I discovered my culture later as I began to understand it. I didn't grow up, and then I went back, and I first of all, I looked beyond the perspective of just the West, of looking at
Mhm.
interesting things like having nice roads and skyscrapers, and those are great things. But once I got to go to the villages and see the culture and sit with the
Ooh,
elders
Mm.
yes.
and
Now we're
acknowledge,
talking.
man, this is where my father was born, in a village in southern Chad, south of Mundu, called Biba. That's where he came from. Then goes all around the world, has a doctorate, travels all the time and stuff. But I know where he started, right?
Yeah.
And so when you go back and you sit with those elders, and you sit with the uh, young African kids who are in the village, are going to grow there and they're going to die in that village. and your kids or your friends they have things that these kids cannot imagine.
Mhm.
Just as perspective changes things.
Yes.
To Dr.
Yes.
Ameni's point, and then we also have to be working together. Ubuntu requires us to that
Mm,
my success can't happen if I can't pull someone else along, and not
that's
Correct.
simply of my social, economic, and political class, but those who
correct.
don't have. That's why
Yes.
my passion is not, with
Oh,
understanding technology and the economic boom happening in Africa and
something happened.
individuals. Are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, he's there. He's there.
Okay.
Yes, I can
He's there.
hear you.
Yeah. Go
Okay,
ahead.
with
Go ahead.
all of the investment going into Africa, which is great. I read up on those things now because of individuals like Ben Collins and you, Gideon, and you, Dr. Isai. But I always
Mhm.
challenge us: how is it possible that we are moving up the social economic ladder, but yet in our backyards we have all these nonprofit organizations from around the world who fly over our heads in order to take care of our people in our backyard? This makes no sense.
Yeah.
This
It does.
I'm just baffled by this. So as we move along those lines, we need to be finding ways to pull individuals from our own countries together and not always pulling them into the city. Why does everybody? I had a young man in Zambia who said, I don't want to go to Lusaka, the capital. I want to stay in my village. So why do we have to pull individuals to the major hubs, which I maybe understand there's maybe underlying things, but take those hubs and pull them into the villages or into,
Mm,
bigger cities around. So those are ways to do stuff. And there's organizations out there doing things that we need to talk about. So you talk about somebody working together. Kwanda, an organization I discovered out of London. The young man, I think I mentioned Dr.
Yep.
Gideon. I'm going to try to get a hold of him. He's bringing the African diaspora together and saying we need to work together, putting our $5, $10, I don't know, our pounds together to do these projects, and they vote on it. It says not
mm.
give it, but
Yep.
once they do it, they give a proposal to anybody who's giving, and you vote on whether
Wow.
this is a project up or down. There's an organization called Africa No Filter who tells African stories through the lens of Africans by
Yep.
Africans for Africans.
Yes.
All of it.
I
They
give
do it,
credit
and
to you.
I like what they do. And then there's Nala who is or there's remittances. And there's others, but Nala I'm very familiar because we're sending all this money back home, which is actually sustaining a lot of our economies.
Right,
So
issues. Yeah.
we've all been complicit in some way. The question that Stephen Biko was Bantu, I like to call him Bantu,
Mhm.
Stephen Biko was
Yep.
talking about was we must not forget, we must not forget, and we have forgotten who we are. Right? Nobody
Mm,
has to. There was something already there that through
mhm,
time, whether it's colonialism, disappointments that got beat out of us, that we
mhm.
need to recapture. All
Yes.
right. We talk about kings. I actually, Africa is made up of kings and queens. Well, we've lost our kingdom, y'all. We got to get that back. All right. We can't be kings and queens in the ether with nothing to do with it. It just makes us feel good and proud. We got to be kings and queens with actual things that we are engaging, tangible results that we are doing. And technology is, as I'm learning, technology is a way to do that because it grants access. So when I
Yes.
was working with the youth in Zambia, what we would do is we would send them money so they could get on the internet, right? So they have access to that. So we remove that barrier by giving that so they could write their stories and they could post more, right? I do a
Mm,
lot of posting. Regardless of
Yep.
how much posting I do, the Western, people in the West they post more than it just sinks us. But we have to get the
We
stories
should
out
keep
there
going.
as much
Yeah.
as possible. We should be right after just write, post.
Correct.
You're using
yep.
all the social media, uh, you know, uh, platforms in order to do it. Because if you
Yep.
don't, you tell your story, someone else will tell it in your place.
And we are absolutely coming to the storytelling very, very soon.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I want us to take a moment and unpack this. Think for a moment about the situation that we have in Senegal. We have a young
Mm.
president who has two wives. That's our culture in some ways. We have some of our village communities very detached from the urban communities. And yet they have some very genuine, authentic cultural aspects of us, of binding together, completely ignoring what is happening around. Nobody goes hungry if their neighbor has something to eat. Nobody sleeps outside because there's a shelter next door. Those are some old traditions that make us very resilient people, but that doesn't always occur in the West.
Translate.
So my question is, besides exporting our music, besides exporting our ability to excel in all manners of sports, what about the fabric of family? What about the fabric of resiliency that our parents have given us and we can stand tall? I once heard Africans don't go to see medical or mental clinics so often because the bond within is very, very strong. So my question is it possible to tell our story and project this aspect of our culture, which is our resiliency, our egalitarian ethos, our binding together, which always makes us very strong and very healthy, even when circumstances are very bad? Is it possible to export that?
I think we have to be conscious and I think honest in the fact that our culture is changing.
Mhm.
I'm a firm believer that the arc of culture bends towards something positive and progressive going forward.
Mhm.
Where we are now is not where we were before,
Yeah.
either by design or by circumstance.
Okay.
Our culture has become everywhere around the world infused into Africa.
Yeah.
We are not Africa without people who have gone to China, the Orient, the West. All of
Mhm.
them have brought something that has become, like it or not,
Mhm.
who we are now.
Yeah.
And I don't
Yeah.
think we need to run away from that,
Yeah.
because what that has done is that it has mingled and mixed into this new culture of Africa, which is
Mm.
why our music can talk to everybody in the world
Yeah.
now, which is why when we have there's this new era of superstardom in our culture where
Yeah.
everybody in I've been to places, the most remote places, and people can listen to the music and recognize something that they like. But that's
Yeah.
because maybe Africans went there
Yeah.
for economic or political reasons, have imbibed some of that, and now this has become who they are. But
Yeah.
there is a base culture that still remains,
Yeah.
Ubuntu, our
Ubuntu.
our our fabric
Yes.
of working
Togetherness.
together. There
Yeah.
is a fabric that remains on which this there's a tapestry on which all of these other new things have layered, and we need
Mhm.
to, I think, accept that
Mhm.
Africa in the culture has changed,
Yeah.
redefine what this new culture is, and be
Yes.
proud of it enough to utilize it. I
Oh.
think that because there is always a tendency of back in the day, culture was culture, but that culture is the same culture that brought us colonialism.
True.
That
Yeah. Yeah.
culture is
Yeah.
the same culture that brought us a split across the African continent. So we need
Yeah.
to be honest that
Yeah.
if we are going into new culture, is what we decide to do
Yeah.
amongst our people. And we know the things, I mean, we can talk
Mm.
about them, the things that
Yeah.
are timeless and that we do
Yes.
not want to change, right?
Yep.
And those are, I think, the pillars on which we build this new African culture that we are now exporting. I think some
Mm.
of the major vehicles of culture for us are music,
Yes.
storytelling, and food.
Dance. How about dance? Music. Okay.
Well,
Music
yeah,
and dance.
music is involved with dance.
Okay.
All three,
Okay.
those are major vehicles of culture, all
Mm.
three of which
Food.
can be democratized with technology. And that's
Okay.
kind of what we
Wow.
are seeing now. You
That is
have
very
kids
interesting. Music, food,
producing
and
and storytelling.
storytelling. Okay.
Yes.
Uh,
Mhm.
That,
I would
and the
definitely
good thing
want
about
Ruben.
that is that every culture can identify with those three things.
Yep.
But
Yep.
because of where we have been and what we have endured and what the resilience we have, we are able to speak in our language to every
Mm.
culture. And
Mm.
that is
Wow.
powerful.
That
So
is
let's layer
definitely
that with
powerful.
technology and move forward. Use culture and do that, but we cannot shy away from the fact that the culture of the past, though amazing, brought us to some of the places where we are at right now.
Now we're like still like, oh my goodness, we lost our hair, we lost our
We
mind,
lost
and we're
A, B,
struggling to
C,
find out.
D.
Yep, yep. So, what do you think about that, Brother Ruben? Should we export some of that cultural fabric? Is it even possible to export it? Because after that, I'm going to take you guys on a wild, wild ride about storytelling. Are we telling our stories enough? But first, I want to give you time to talk about Can we export that fabric of that older gentleman in the village who is giving counsel, wise counsel to his grandson, and knowing fully well that he can't even use a cell phone? And maybe he's still a polygamist, or maybe he's still walking around barefooted, but he's very, very tough. He has seen crisis come and go. He has seen famine come and go. He's still true to himself because we
Still
are
there.
who we are. Omuntu, Ngubuntu, Ngabantu, as they say in South Africa. Can we export some of that? Because that is severely lacking in the West. I see people dying of isolation in the West, not in Africa.
Yeah.
I don't think Africans die of isolation, not in Africa, maybe somewhere else. So do you think we can export that? You're a social scientist. Talk to us about that. And that makes you look very pensive. So I don't know, maybe this is
No, I
Thinking
putting you
hard.
into maybe doctor has put you into a trance.
no, he hasn't. I just figured, I don't want, we're like, everyone has a culture. I have American friends, white friends, Indian friends. We all have our cultures, and we want to be able to. We live through that in the way we see things, our perspectives, the way we interact with one another. And so, to your question, I would say yes. Our interactions with a lot of my Western friends come from a cultural premise as well, right?
Sure.
And so, first, like my first thought. I'll give you an example. So I had friends who recently lost a family member. All right. As Africans, what's our first thought? I need to go sit with them.
You need to go there.
I need to physically go be with them.
Yes.
That's my first inkling as an African.
Yeah.
But in the West, you got to be careful because
Sure.
now it's time for space.
Mhm.
Oh, that's the time they need for space because there's family and so you have this tension going on. And as I said, something very important. Back in the day, I'd be like, "Oh, it's this is wrong." No, it's their culture. You have to show compassion and understanding, and be teachable. And I've had opportunities to teach with a lot of my Western friends, like, and tell them, I would if you were an African, as I lost his mother, I don't have to say anything. I will go. I will be there. No questions asked. But my Western friends, when I got to be like, okay, hey, when can I come over? So we just work within that. That's just our reality, right? And I'm trying to convince people. And then the results of that, though, to your point, Dr. Gideon, is different. Because I will say this, like a lot of my African friendships continue to grow and grow and grow out on me. But we know very well, because I know you two, I'm good in Cameroon. I'm straight.
Absolutely.
Because your friends are now my friends.
Absolutely.
Right?
No questions
I don't
asked.
need to know them. I don't have to have dinner. I've called them. You call Cameroon. You say, hey, my brother Rowidi's coming. Boom, boom. It's done.
Yes. It's
my Western friends like that. My friendship is with that one person.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
Right. And so, but I have seen some of my, Western friends embrace that, and just how we interact and want to learn more and stuff like that. And so you have those situations. So I don't beat myself up. I just use that as teaching opportunities, and some people buy into it and some people don't. I told my Western friends one time, I said, if my father gets sick or my mom is sick in the hospital and you don't show up, we're gonna have a problem, a serious one. So I'm putting my culture on them, giving them permission to not talk to me, to push their culture aside of space. And, I call you brother. You better be there because I'm giving you permission to be in my field. That's how it kind of.
Thank you for that. I have to say something on top of that. It's just like, but why are we trying to export it if it's that great? Why do we need to export? Why don't we use it? It's where I come from. It's like we must not export to show that it is great. We can utilize to get productivity out of this great culture to show that it is great, and so we don't have to do it. Like, okay, I was running an economic experiment with our tools of finance. We all know in they call it tongtin in French, they call it jangi in Cameroon. But what our culture does is we get into a quorum of people, and we donate money every month so that you can utilize a large amount of money to do something substantial. We have had that for decades and decades. And so we can say that is something that is our own method of finance and banking. Yes. And so my question is, has that made us build bigger companies? has that made us, and it has helped us live, and we
Yeah.
think it is really good. So let us move it one step ahead.
Further.
So what I was
Oh,
trying to do was, instead of using that money to give one person to do something, why don't we use the same monthly type Njangi, but instead of giving it to somebody, invest in a company,
Mm.
invest in a young man who or young woman who has an idea that we can promote. What that does
yes.
is, it is our culture that is providing value,
Yes.
proving
Yes.
itself
Yes.
in the marketplace of ideas, in the
Oh,
Mhm.
marketplace of culture. So
yeah.
I am all for showing our friends and people out here, but I'm so much more in challenging us to show our culture out. And
Yes.
the Bible says, "By their fruits ye shall know them."
Yes. That's
Let us
right.
use the said culture to show out.
Yep. And the world will not notice that. The
And
world
they
will
will
even be,
notice. We will not
there
need
will
to
be,
market it.
there will be the path to our door begging to learn,
Precisely.
just
Like,
like
how do
we
you do
probably,
this? How
yes.
do you do that? We
It,
we, we talk about subgroups like the Israelites and the Jews,
Yes.
or Asians. They have cultures that they have used to build financial mega houses and mega structures.
Yes. Thank you.
But it's their structures. They would live in the same house until they can buy that house and then go to
Yes.
the next one. But that is their culture. But
Yep.
they are making it work for them in a way
Yep.
that others can see tangibly. So
Mm-hmm.
mm.
let us use our culture in
Wow.
the same way.
And
That is
I'm gonna
deep.
add, I know you're gonna take the story, so I want to give you that floor, but je voulais ajouter rapidement en français parce
Le
que,
français, ouais.
oui,
Bien sûr.
parce qu'il faut reconnaître, c'est pas seulement l'anglais, on est colonisé
Ah
par
oui,
plusieurs pays, et il
Oui.
faut qu'on
ah oui,
parle, je voulais seulement parler en français pour accueillir nos spectateurs, ceux qui vont voir ça, qui parlent français. Mais la
ouais,
culture est très importante pour les Africains, l'identité. Ça, c'est quelque chose qui nous donne un peu la force, qui nous donne le poids. C'est l'identité de nos ancêtres, de
ouais.
connaître où nous sommes, hein, de connaître que dans les villages, on a les anciens qui sont là, qui nous ont nourris, qui nous ont guidés. Il faut pas qu'on les oublie. Et parfois qu'on oublie les choses parce qu'on veut avancer vers l'ouest. Et c'est bon d'avancer vers l'ouest. C'est très
Oui,
important parce qu'on est dans un sens global. Mais
ouais.
il ne faut pas qu'on oublie, comme Dr Isaiah a dit, on a déjà quelque chose en nous qui nous a liés, qui est vraiment, qui nous a liés déjà avec nos ancêtres. Et c'est très important qu'on n'oublie pas ça. Parce que c'est entre nous, les Africains, c'est avec ça qu'on a utilisé les avancées, non, pour vivre. Pendant
Ouais,
des
Mm.
années sans, sans l'Ouest. Avant
ouais.
même les colonisateurs. On
Oui.
était là, non? On a vécu parce qu'on avait ce sens d'identité. Et c'est ce sens d'identité que vous voyez les Africains qui sont aux États-Unis, en Europe, ils vont toujours retourner chez eux. Ils vont toujours enseigner leurs enfants l'identité. Ça, c'est ma culture. Ça, c'est ma langue.
Mm.
Ça, c'est vos parents. Tu vois?
Mm.
Si c'était seulement les choses comme la technologie,
Ouais,
si c'était suffisant, pourquoi on va parler du passé? On sait que ce n'est pas suffisant. Il y a plus que ça. Comme ça, on
ouais.
parle de passer à nos enfants pour qu'ils passent ça de génération en génération pour qu'ils ne nous oublient pas.
Mhm,
Okay?
Mm.
C'est-
mhm.
Bon, parlons de français. Est-ce que vous trouvez le temps à faire apprendre tes enfants, tes collègues à parler la paratoire? I'm asking this
Mm.
question to Brother Ruben and to Dr. Isai. Do you take the time to teach your dialect to your kiddos, to your children, to your acquaintances? I say that because each time I call home and I want to speak with a family member, they straight away launch into English language. I
Mhm.
have
Mm.
nothing wrong with the English
Mm.
language, but I find it profoundly wrong that we're losing our identity of our mother tongues. And that to me is sacred. It's something that was given to us from above. And I feel like we're losing it. And it aches my heart. So, but I want to ask you, gentlemen, do you teach your home language, your mother tongue, to your kiddos, just like the Jewish strive to do as much as possible?
Mm. I think we lost that battle some time ago, because we are already in a generation of people who lost a little bit of that. You cannot teach what you don't
Yeah,
know.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, you're right. Yeah.
and I don't say that to brag. I'm just saying it as a reality. For me,
Mm.
what I have tried to do is get my parents to come and reteach, so
Mm.
my kids know the
Mm.
basics. That there is there was and there is a language that is different. You can count, you can say hi, you can say this, but because I myself am not fluent in Gi, I can
Okay.
speak some of it, I can talk with my elders, but I'm
Yeah.
not fluent enough to pass it on to them
Okay.
wholesale, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
so I can have my parents teach them, but not so much because they're ever going to use it, but because
Yeah.
it's the sense of identity. Because
Yes.
another thing about
Yeah.
Africa that I have to be honest is part of the reason that we are held back is because we do have very specific ethnicities and identities, and because of that, that has acted as a force of separation and not integration. And I am of the opinion
Mm.
that moving forward, we need to integrate more than separate. I speak
Mm.
Nguni, and somebody else will speak
I speak
Swahili,
I speak
and
Meta,
yes,
and
great
I
identity,
picked up some Gi, I picked up some Hausa, I picked up some
great.
Swahili, I picked up some Setswana in South Africa, I picked up some Zulu. I am
Can we trade together?
always keen to learn an extra
I was,
word.
Can we trade together? Can we form a company together? If each of
yeah.
us was speaking that individually, the answer
It'll
to that is
be tough.
unfortunately no. Now, was
Yes.
it
Yeah.
supposed to be English or French that was supposed to be our lingua franca? No. Maybe we could have democratized Swahili, or can still do that.
Yes.
But one way or the other, we need to have a way across the continent. Part of what I talked about, connect us and get out of the way, we need to connect us at the level of language.
Okay.
Because
Mhm.
we are, I mean, Cameroon itself has 280 plus. There is
Yeah.
no progress with 280 plus languages in an economic sense. It's going
Yeah.
to be difficult. So we need to find something that we can talk within us and across us, right? So to your question, I think there is a place for identity in language. I think we need to keep passing it on just so that those languages don't die. We need to document them. We need
Yep.
to keep them going on in culture, in music and song. But we
Yeah.
also need to identify that maybe sometimes because of the plurality thereof, there has been a limitation it's set for us. And so it might not be the fact that English was what we should have done, but the road towards connecting us means also the road towards being able to communicate and share
Thank you.
ideas. And it is
Thank you.
difficult to do that otherwise. If you look at empire, from time immemorial across history, almost every empire that succeeded codified language across everybody that they conquered.
Yes.
And the reason for that is obvious. Commerce, progress is really difficult when people cannot speak. The Tower of Babel stopped because people started speaking different languages. And so those languages are exactly who we are and should be catered and nurtured, but we should also find languages where we can talk across. In the same way we want roads, in the same way we want roads across West, Central, and Southern Africa, in the same way we want internet to connect us, in the same way we want the borders shut down so we can travel for commerce and for exchange of ideas, we need a lingua franca that can make us actually talk when we arrive in these places.
I agree with you to a very, very large extent that you cannot give that which you don't have. I also disagree that we must keep harnessing and keeping it for identity reasons, which I agree with you on both points, because otherwise it comes to a point where our mother tongues will be completely erased from the surface of the earth.
Correct.
And if that was our sacred gift from the
The
Almighty
gods
One,
themselves.
then it means now we're now talking to him through an interpreter, and he'd be like, "Nah, that's not what I gave you
Correct.
guys when you left from
Yep.
here. That's not what I gave you guys. You're talking to me through some foreign language. I don't even identify with that. I identify you with the original one. How about you use the original one that I gave you?" Now that's my comical piece right there. But I want to hear from Brother Ruben. What do you think about this issue of language? Should we try to integrate it? Should we try to, move on because we want to, find ways to trade, educate in ways that are more cost effective? Or what should we do? I need you to chime in on that because you speak French, you speak
Yeah,
you
my
speak
French
English, you
is
speak a multiplicity of languages.
Languages.
yeah, I'm gonna do more effort. I don't speak much now, so it's dwindling. So I'm starting to listen to more TV 5 Afrique, and
Yeah.
even
Right.
with some of what I wanted, I bring more French speakers in because if you look at the reality in Africa, to that point, like you have I think what 13 or 16 French speaking African countries, and the other majority are English, and you have, I think, one Spanish and a
Spanish,
couple
you have
Portuguese or the other
and then
way.
Arab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can tell the economic situation, the political history of those countries based upon that. You know how the English-speaking countries are somewhere more advanced, but we still have our brothers and sisters who are in these French-speaking countries.
Yeah.
And so you can find, my dad ran a library in Centrafrique, Bangui. It's a French-speaking country, but 70-80% of their books in the library were in English, because you have to translate them into French, and people don't do that, right? And so you can see the dominance of what language does economically and politically. And so sometimes I think we couch situations in a either or rather than a both and, or in a healthy tension. So what Isaiah is saying is true, that we need to do commerce and have maybe a language to help with that. But we also need to remember that prior to even a lot of trade was done in multiple languages. You just had the people could pick up enough of each other's language to create a new, a kind of Creole new language to get commerce done, right? That was time. Now things have changed, and maybe with AI, it will allow us more of that ability to, be able to, maybe able to speak language, be able to understand it, because you can get, hopefully the right translation. But there's also dangers, because words matter.
Yes.
I think your father wrote a book, or I think I read that. Was that your dad, Dr. Zai, who wrote the book? It had around language. It was either, anyway, it had to do with Cameroon language, something in there about the importance that
he wrote
words,
a book about words and fragments of Ngi culture.
Exactly.
Correct.
That's powerful, because in African languages, we just don't throw words around.
Fair enough.
They have meaning, and they have a significance. And you could have the word that, if it's said it can be said 5 different ways, will have completely different meaning. And so you have to be careful with that, with what you say. And so that is embedded. And so what colonization really did is, if it could crush languages, then it would crush identity and culture. And it was successful in doing it, right?
Yes.
What was a grace to me is, when we were growing up here, my parents didn't speak to us in English. Not one time. They spoke to us only in Gambai. We would respond in English. So when we went home, we're able to understand it, though we were not able to respond, right? Right. So I just speak Ito Banwa, Ito Majea, those little phrases. I know my cousins and those who are watching in chat are gonna make fun of me. Right? Go to Danaya, things like that. But that is the that is the one thing that people try to really, if you're really trying to move something forward in a way to destroy, you destroy language first, or one of the top priorities, and you'll start to control the people. But I think with we talk about technology, is that with technology now, we can help preserve a lot of those languages. People should be interested in those languages. They give us back, looking back and understanding that can actually maybe open up doors to future things, and how we should be carrying ourselves, and identity. One thing that's very important to Africans, and I learned this from you're talking to Africans. One of the interesting things, and I don't know if you guys pick this up, sometimes I'll talk to someone from Africa, comes to the U.S. and I say, "Hey man, tell me your story." Well, I got here, in Baltimore, and I just no. Before the U.S., tell me your story from where you started, not from as if your life started when you set foot here. No. Or when I talk to Africans back home who maybe been successful because of somebody coming from overseas to help, and say, "Yeah, this organization or this company." No, prior to them, you still had a life and you had a story.
Yes.
It may not have been what you wanted, may have visible, but I want to hear about that. Right?
Absolutely.
Because what you're doing is, when you're saying that because of these people, my story began. No. Your story began long before these people you encountered.
Yes.
Right.
And talking
that is
about
what
that,
I want to hear about. Right. Because that has significance. Pull it out. It has that, like, oh, you were doing this. And as I was saying something, we were doing a lot of these things that, quote unquote, are Western already, but it just wasn't couched in a language that was similar, understood. But we were still doing it.
Yep.
With the gathering and how leadership works and all of this stuff. And so I just encourage Africans, because again, my story a little bit is just to encourage Africans that we don't throw things out at the expense of just gaining more things. And it doesn't have to be an either or, it can be a both and. And how do you weave that healthy tension together? Right?
Yep.
It's going to be tension, and we can work it out.
We owe it to ourselves. We absolutely owe it to ourselves to keep those songs, those lyrics, those lullabies those
Mm.
sacred elements of our culture that were passed down from generation to generation through the fabric of language.
Hmm.
Mansa Musa mobilized 13,000 people to go to Mecca on Hajj
Mecca.
and returned peacefully. Do you think he spoke, or in those days, they spoke all those languages along the path all the way through Egypt to Mecca? I don't necessarily think so. My point being, yes, what you're saying, gentlemen, is preservation is of essence. Now, you look around you, are we telling our stories the way we should? Are we talking about our stories of crossing the Atlantic or our stories of before crossing the Atlantic? Do you see our people embracing that? Or are we allowing the CNNs of the world to tell our story and then we just keep cursing at the darkness? Oh my God, it's so dark. Oh my God, it's so dirty. Oh my God, it's so smelly. Instead of stepping up and telling our stories in the form of daily posts like you do, Brother Ruben, in the form of writing books, in the form of other forms of expression, short stories, essays, and all of that. I think we are missing a lot because we're letting others tell our story. Am I wrong?
Of course not. I think you hit that smack on the head. I've been saying that from the very get. That we, I almost want to say, we don't only need to tell our stories. We need to double down on our positive stories, and
Hmm.
and and, and I double down on the positive because there is no lack of
Of
African
positive.
negative stories.
Thank you.
Not only
Hmm.
do we tell ourselves that, but the world has told us that for centuries.
And
And
maybe it's
so
impacting our brains. Maybe
it
it's
has
messing up
impacted
with
our
us.
it impacted our parents and our parents'
A
parents
DNA. Yeah, yeah.
and us. So we are, I think, at an inflection point where we need to say no more, no more, no more. We are
Yes.
going to tell our stories for us by us in a way that would give us our integrity, but in a way that would propel us forward. In a
Hmm.
way that will propel us forward. Our
That's
stories
deep.
need to be able to do that to us. Propelling us forward doesn't mean we forget where we come from, we forget our past. It
Hmm.
means that we understand it, but we are not tied to or hamstrung by it.
Yes. Thank
And so
you.
our stories need to be telling us forward. And so that's why I specialize in the telling of stories forward. I have been writing a blog over the in and out over the last of
Good
10
blog.
plus years. It's
Hmm.
called the Diary of an SOP. Or SOP is just short from the son of a preacher man. But I have
Yeah.
been writing a blog to this and the various opinion issues that I have for over 10 years, and I would continue to write. I stopped for a bit and I could see that there was a lot of traction in what I wrote because of what others wrote to me. Some of my work
Hmm.
got published in some magazines in Ghana and all of that. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh, this can have resonance across the Pan
Absolutely.
African veil. And so I have started to write because
There
I
you
think there is
go.
a voice there and there is
Yes.
something that I want to say.
There you go.
And I don't care if it is read by 5 people or by 500,000 people. I am going to write anyway. All
that
right.
is that is what makes a voice strong, because in the days when there's a win, it's there. When there's no win, it's there. But
It
one
is
day,
still there.
that
One
win,
day
that
it will
same
be
win, will
heard.
disperse it.
And
We
I
disperse it
believe
to
that
another land.
the world unfolds the way it should. If 3 people hear it, that means those are the 3 people that God needed that message for. And so I will
Yes,
continue to write. I think
absolutely.
it behooves us as opinion holders from a Pan African perspective to keep writing.
There you
And
go.
I also write because it not only tells our stories, but charts a way forward.
Hmm.
What I think can be the way forward. And not only for us. I said from the start that I am a Pan Africanist, and I've become one even more so because of my travels, because the echoes of our drums from Africa don't only beat for us.
Thank
They
you.
beat for our brothers that left long time ago. And I'm talking
Wow.
African
Wow.
Americans, I'm talking our Caribbean brothers
Wow.
and sisters.
Wow. Wow.
Our drums beat that far.
Yep.
You need to
Yep.
go to them and see how proud they are that African music has taken the stage.
Yes. Yes.
It's amazing that 10 years ago I was in Jamaica and I could not hear anything about African music, but then
Yeah.
it's like Big Brother has arrived, right?
Yes.
And now they are mixing it. Oh, Big Brother, finally, our
Yes.
Big Brother has given something that we can be proud of. Our ancestors, that place we always talked about, is doing
Yes.
something.
Thank
And
you.
so that comes out of positive music. It comes out of positive storytelling. It comes out of
Yes.
positive platforms for our music,
Creation.
our culture, our
It's
food. But we need
dissemination.
to platform our
Yes.
voices and
Yes.
write up for all I care, sing songs for all I care. I love the best videos for me from Africa are those that they do it in the neighborhood with
Yep.
water running and dogs running around. That is our story. We
Yeah.
are comfortable in this.
Keep it authentic.
Yes, if you're going to do skyscrapers and rap, great. When we do Afrobeat, we do it exactly where we are. This dust right up to this level on our walls, but we have a happiness that you cannot take
You
away.
cannot take
We
that
have a
away from us.
resilience that is going to come
Can
and stay, and we
cannot
have a
take it.
forward outlook that will draw you in, even though you don't understand why. So for me, those are the stories we tell moving forward, and
Wow.
anybody should be able to do that. If not to your neighbors, if not by press, if not by blogs, if not by books, by word of mouth. But
Yes.
we have to double down, I think, on positive stories.
Stories.
Not because we are putting our head. I always say that there is no sand to put our heads in because you don't need to turn left or right to hear the negative. Part of
Mm.
where the world has put us over the last century is because they have told us those negative stories. So it's okay
Yeah.
to have them, but let's
Yeah.
tell ourselves the positive ones because a
Yes.
positive story is a positive perspective, it's a positive
Yes.
change.
Yes.
That's how I see
And
it.
that is, I mean, that's like a very, very, very passionate defense of our storytelling, which I am all about that. This channel is dedicated to storytelling,
Yeah.
especially the backstory. Where
And
were
I
you
applaud you for that.
before you became famous? You see, that's where I started by asking, what were you doing before you became this famous as
Yeah.
someone in the world of technology? But I want to go back to Ruben and ask, is there something in the way we're telling our story that you, from the eye, through the eye of a critical thinker, that we're missing? What are we missing? Is there a missing ingredient? Tell us, because we need to know. Our people are listening. Those in Asia, those in Americas, those in Europe, those in the Caribbean. Professor Agnete from Ghana calls us the cheetah generation, not the hippo generation.
But the
We are
cheetah.
all over the place. We are
Yes,
all over the place. You go to Shanghai, you go to
exactly.
anywhere, we're there. We are on the move. We are agile. What are we missing in telling our story? Is it because we've been told we're not good at this for so long that we stop learning from Achebe and sharing in the authentic ways?
You said it, authenticity. There's authentic nature in our stories. I think one of the things that, I worked in the business world. I actually worked for ExxonMobil for about 3 years, and then sitting around business people more now and learning from that. There's a desire to do that. People talk about marketing, storytelling, right? Marketing is storytelling, and also how to take that marketing story and tell it in what 90 seconds, sometimes a minute and a half. You have to
Mhm.
have the elevator speech, like we're in the
Yep.
elevator. And someone, I actually wrote articles like, oh, what's your elevator speech, stuff like this. Now I was thinking, I was in Africa, at least in Jamaica, we had a big building, had no elevator. So I was like, that's not
Yeah.
gonna work. My thing is, what is your elder speech?
Yes.
Yeah.
What is your elder speech?
Yeah.
Because to me, when I say what is your elder speech, is that we take time
Hmm.
to hang out together and to be together. Time I think it's really challenging for me and for us who've been here. When you look at how the West works when it comes to time,
Yeah.
everything is moved and calculated. You have to have
Yeah.
10, 20 things going.
Yeah.
It's affecting Africa too. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
speak as if somehow we're not touched by that now. But what we need to remember, that I really believe is holding us in Africa, that we don't
Mhm.
give enough attention and credence to, is the village. Because
Mm.
as the cities change, Yaoundé and Accra and Lusaka and Jamena, right? These cities begin to change and take on a lot of Western ways of doing things.
Yes.
It is those who are in the village that help us remember, hey, you need to remember to spend time. You need to come and
Mhm.
see us. You remember the elders, we still have a say so.
Remember to
Mhm.
There's a
slow
level of
down.
respect.
Let's slow
You
it
need to,
down a
you
little
need to,
bit.
you,
Yep.
you need to remember your brothers and sisters, right? I truly believe this. And I was thinking about that more is when I see all this investment in Series A, Series B's, I'm learning about that, millions of dollars. I'm like, that's good. That's something to be proud of and excited about. but also I'm critical. We talk about being critical. Sometimes our fellow Africans, we got to be critical of one another.
Yes.
Our individuals who are privileged and elite talking to their fellow privileged elites on the other side, right? They're not talking to their cousin or nephew who's in the village because he hasn't reached. So the idea that they have to reach this level before you can engage in them is like, this is not how it works. It
That
shouldn't
is
work for us.
anathema. That is
That is
should
not
be
what we
absolutely.
You
should
cannot reach
also
number
measure
one by mimicking. Right?
Yes.
mimicking. That's a good word.
You
And we need
cannot
to
reach number
recognize
one.
success.
You cannot reach the top by mimicking. If
Yeah.
China is going where it is because they have taken capitalism and
Yeah.
transformed it into something that fits what they have been doing for centuries, and it has made it unique and
Yep.
come out different.
To
So
them. Yeah.
we cannot mimic everything the West does and think
Yes.
we're going to
Yeah.
come out from under them.
No, 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 no.
We're going to
No, we
lose a
have
bunch of stuff. And I'll put a story to this. So there's a young man, I go back to Zambia, who I was talking to him one day, and he said to me, he lives in the village Mukuni, and it's near southern in Livingston, outside of Livingston. And I remember saying to me, he said, Ruben, I don't want to go to Lusaka. Lusaka is a capital. That's where you go for higher education and you move on. He said, I don't want to go. I want to stay here in my village, and I want to grow and develop the village. And I remember when we sent him some money, he would send these pictures. So he gathered a bunch of young people and they repaired a well with some of the money I sent for him to buy minutes for the phone so he could do internet. He actually spent that and fixed this well that was down. He started a store, made a grass hut, and he went to Livingston and stuff and bought stuff so that his village could have a store. That is his heart. And for somebody to come in and say, hey, you can do more, this to me is a problematic. You telling me what he's doing is not doing more? What do you want him to do? Go and get a 4-year degree and then go and do? No, he has done a lot. And that is his success. And so when you minimize those things within the context of individuals' environment and say this is not success because it doesn't reach this level that is defined by somebody else, this is problematic. In that village, he is successful because the village didn't have a store until he put one there. Right? And they needed it. And so he can move from the grass store to making a brick store in his village because his heart. And so sometimes we try to rip that out of people as if somehow getting out of the village is the ultimate goal. Yeah, because the truth be is once you move up, to really look back is just degree wise and economic wise is really difficult after that, right? It's just to be honest, I think I admire about some individuals I know who've been successful, and when they go home, they go straight to the village because they need to remember and get respite and not forget, right? But that barrier, that division, because of all of these things you've gotten now, sometimes the village is now pushed away, right? And so I have a heart for Africans to really say, hey, what can you defining that's successful for your village and have it grow and develop economically with hospitals and stores.
Wow.
And those stories of individuals moving out. I said to someone, if you have 800 kids in a village and maybe you take 10 out and you tell the story, oh, they were in this. Well, how about the other 790 kids? How about them? You're not taking all of them out. So how do we improve their situation where they're at? Does that make sense a little bit? Or give them opportunities where, in that location.
Wow. I am so delighted this conversation is just getting started, but I also know I have to respect both of you. I know I can tell from your passion that this is something that touches close to home, just like it does for me. I believe that what you're sharing here is going to help someone in some shape or form open up their mind or give them the encouragement to keep going. Maybe it's that guy in Zambia. Maybe it's another guy who is trying to learn about the modern business concept that Dr. Ameni has developed. Let us end on that one, Dr. Ameni. You have kind of found a way to improve Njangi. What is that system? Tell us how it works so that those who are hungry to use something from our culture and change the world, they can learn from you and use that to empower themselves and empower the world. Tell us about that business concept and how it works. You're muted, Doc.
I'm sorry, that's the vestige of doing too many video calls. I almost always, I almost always mute myself
I promise
for
we'll
the
wrap this.
benefit of everybody else.
We'll wrap this up in 3 minutes. So
You have to excuse me. So I'll try to be
yeah,
brief.
yeah.
So, what I am pretty much doing is what myself and my wife started a small company in Cameroon called Bervin Consulting Limited. But the idea there was to be able to find a vehicle and or deliver a platform for economic empowerment. And for me, the way of doing that is by using our what we call our Njangi concept. It's called an investment fund, and it's Ruben just talked about somebody who's doing something really similar out there, which is we are able to pool our resources on a monthly basis, or like we would do in Njangi, but instead of giving that to somebody to go do something by themselves, we keep that money and roll that into a project, an economic project, a company, a project that we can vote up and down. And then we are able to keep giving this money. And the recognition thereof is that we don't come from a ton of capitalistic wealth. And we are at the same time, a lot of those now are not only feeding their families but feeding other families and multiple mouths. And so to be able to keep money and then start a business while doing all of this is not very tenable. And so the idea is we want you to be a micro investor in your own project. So you define what shares you want in the project and you can pay to it on a monthly basis. That way you can still keep your economic situation as is, even as you build somewhere. But even more critically is that we are trying to find the people who are on the ground, who have the knowledge and the expertise to make that kind of money work properly. Like I said, we have all tried projects by ourselves and we have failed. I can tell my stories of failure with companies that I have started that went under. And
Yes.
although I learned, part of what I learned from that is the idea of not going at it by myself. But
Yep.
I also learned the fact that I can spread the risk in a sense
Yep.
where if
There
we
you
come
go.
together
Yeah.
and we contribute on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, and find the right companies to invest in, then we are making bigger companies. We will get a Facebook
Fantastic.
someday. But you
Fantastic.
don't have to be a Facebooker to be in the success story of Facebook.
So thank you. So
You
the
can
question
contribute
is,
the junkie to it. Yeah.
are those companies more in the diaspora or the more on the homeland, on the
Oh no,
motherland?
no, no. This is mostly companies that are investing on the continent.
Fantastic. That is
There is
sincere.
no
That is
there is no, it's 100%, it's on the continent or bust. We
okay.
don't
Thank you.
invest out of Africa. We are only
Thank
investing
you.
within Africa itself.
Thank you so much. Where can we find some information about that? And I'll ask the same question to Mr. Gerardo if he has some other connections or contacts that he wants to share with our viewers. Some of them are in America, some are in Europe, some are in the Caribbean and beyond, Middle East. But first, Doc, tell us where can we find some information about? You mentioned Berinville, or I don't think I heard it right.
The ribbon.
Oh,
Berin.
Did you
sorry.
freeze?
Yes, we froze for a bit there. Oh, I from my end, you guys froze, but apparently I froze to you too. But yes, so Bervin Consulting Limited is the company that we started. Behind it, there's a platform that we were building so that people could join and progress. But otherwise, at the moment, we were running a pilot because I've been in innovation my whole life, and the idea of piloting something before you roll it out is what we do. And so you can easily contact me directly on that platform, or I put my digits somewhere. You can also check out my blog, which is the Afro Musings of an Afro Mind, and
Okay.
you can hear some of my ideas and where we want them to go. So for participating within this system, you can write an email or write to the info@Bervin Consulting that you're interested in it, and we can always get back to you, show you the projects that are available, show you
Yes.
how you can come in, and then we can go from there.
Okay, we'd love to have that, maybe the link and the email in our show notes, so you can email that to us, because I say this from historical perspective. At least in the last 1 year, there have been at least 7 or 8 times when somebody comes to me requesting, can we have that information for that person? So we don't know who is listening. Some of them I know them. Some of them I had no idea that they were watching this or they were commenting about that. So we need that information for the show notes. To Brother Ruben, is there something you want to say last, or you want to give us any connection or contacts to? It is thanks to you that I know about the No Filter group, and I'm in communication now with them. I'm trying to observe what they're doing and see if I can learn from them. Is there any connection or contact on how we can find you to learn from your brilliant mind, sir?
No, I just, post on Facebook quite a bit, telling stories across the African diaspora. I tell a lot of stories also of some of my engagements here in the West. And I have to, I tell people I tell more of the African stories because there's really no work to be done to tell the American story, right? It's
Yeah,
everywhere.
it's
You go on
everywhere.
Facebook, everything, like even things that are happening here in the US get told around the world a lot quicker than things in Africa get
Yes,
to, get told. One,
yes,
because I'm just interested in what's happening around the world. So I'm a news junkie and want to know
yeah,
what's happening there. But we have to have an interest, as especially in Africans. I talk a lot more to Africans because of what Stephen Biko was saying, is that we're in a we have an opportunity with technology at our hands
Here's the
in
forecast for
order to
tomorrow.
let our
Look for
thoughts and our
lots of
opinions be
sun with a
known
high of
more
93
widely,
degrees Fahrenheit
and
and a
not
low of
only for
67.
those who are privileged, not only
Alexa
those
was
who are privileged.
Alexa was interrupting.
Alexa,
We love technology, but every once in a while
Alexa
it
wants to take me on.
pokes its nose into our business. But please wrap up your thought. I know
No,
you may have to run or something.
yeah, no, and I'd give
I
in
have a
giving
question
that
about
voice and
Anthony.
opportunity for all types of people to share their stories. I'm very passionate about people in the villages and our rural communities, and
Yes,
I'm passionate about them just because I think we're sitting up here, we're privileged in a way, right?
Yeah.
very.
We
Yeah.
our parents or grandparents got us into situations. They put us in opportunities and access to things for us to move forward. We have cousins and cousins, nephews that don't have that,
Yes,
right? And our job is not to take care of all of them. We can't. That's not possible. But it's to give them access and opportunity
True.
where they can, so they can
yes,
have
yes,
ability to do things and to do things not to do things where they are. And I think sometimes
yes,
we look at Africa through a lens that we've been adopted of poverty. And I'm like, no, I have I have sat in some poor, like, yeah, poor villages. But man, the people were happy. We ate together, we sang, we had some good times. It wasn't that they didn't know they were poor. They didn't know didn't have this or that. But even in that, they learned to give respect and maintain culture. And I give one example. I like doing this one. I had a friend of mine from the States, good friend, love him, man. He came to Chad. I took him to the village, and this lady came and gave him two chickens. And he said he was going to say no, I don't need the chickens, because he was looking at the lens that, yes, this is giving a chicken is a lot, because when you're, it's meat, right? And it's what they used to live, have get eggs, or to cook down the road. But I said to him, take the chickens,
yes,
and we can eat them or give them to somebody else. Because
yes.
why are you depriving an individual of their will, of their desire to bless you and feel good? I
And
said,
a goodwill.
in a good way. So is poverty that, if you're poor, does it take away your feelings of feeling good, of doing something for somebody? Does that go away now? Right. So you're looking at that in that lens. And I don't think it was intentional, but I think we forget that, yes, people are poor, but they're not non-human. They're still human, and they still want to be able to
Absolutely.
give and contribute in ways that make them feel good. Even for those, for us who have, we need to learn to accept it and say, yes, I take it because you're part of this movement. Right. I'll take your $2. To your point, is, if someone wants to contribute, we'll take it because
Yeah.
it brings you into the fold. Right. We're
Not
not dismissing you. So we have to change that. I have to change it, because that was part of my complicity of looking through that lens. And then it would exclude all these individuals because they didn't have what I have. But I tell you one something they had that I didn't have, that some peace and some joy in ways that we didn't have, because I had all these things now, but it didn't make me any better. Now I'm spending all the time trying to maintain the things that I have
I
rather than
tell
being
you
able
what.
just to enjoy them. But I'll leave it there.
I
So,
tell you what, because this channel, as we said at the start, is all about storytelling, and it particularly focuses on unsung heroes with untold stories that are changing the narrative.
Mm.
So I'll be delighted if you give me the story of that guy in Zambia. We would find some way to project that story further out. And
Yeah.
to Dr. Ameni, I would find some ways to project the story about the work that you're doing to other people so that they get to know we are not here just for ourselves. We're here so that we can, in some small way, share our light with others. So, on that note, I want to thank you, gentlemen, so much for your time. I know how busy you are. So, to have found this day, this time, I'm so forever grateful to that. And I want to thank you that may it be a great weekend until we catch up again in person and maybe share roasted corn or
And some
share
plums.
maybe some plums.
Yeah. Dr. Gideon and Dr. Design. I gotta get a doctor in front of my name, man. You gotta
know,
not kill
man.
me.
Don't worry.
Anytime,
But
but
thank you
that's
so
not
much,
the
Dr. Gideon. I
requirement.
appreciate you
Yes.
doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
to see
Thank
you,
you so
Zach.
much. Have a great
Thank you.
evening,
All right.
All right,
gentlemen.
bro.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Till next time. Bye.
Bye.